Hello, beautiful beings of the TFC community, and hi to all foot nerds out there. Chief Nick checking in here on April 8th. I hope you're all having a great week and a great day. Now that the weather's getting sunnier, at least here in Canada it is. So first I want to thank everyone, all the nerds who tuned into the Q&A session this morning on Zoom. Basically, we were talking about how our role as health guides is really to ask better questions and lead people to learning opportunities, not to give answers. And I think that that's a really powerful insight for any health professionals out there. I think it's really convenient to think that we can give people answers, but I don't think it's true that we can, because our experience only provides our answers. It can't provide others. And so I think a good health professional doesn't give people the answers. They facilitate learning by asking better questions or directing to where or how someone can go about learning why they have the problem that they have, because only you can solve your own problems. So today's check-in is going to be kind of nerdy, because these are things that make up my day-to-day role at TFC, which might not be of interest to a lot of people, but I think are extremely important as sort of core elements in how we do what we do and how we make sense of the world and how we work together to understand health. So the first one is this notion of rules without rulers, and that's a really interesting one. I'm fascinated and I get a lot of inspiration from distributed systems. So something like Bitcoin, for example, which right now is like super fringe to say, or like nerdy to say. But when people realize that, I live in Canada, for example, the average amount of money our country prints is about 8% a year. So if you hold $100 after a year, on average, it's worth $92. A year after that, it's worth 8% less. And so if you just hold money, or if you're making cash as your income source, it's getting less valuable every year. And this past year, they printed 18.5% more money, which is crazy. And no one really knows that they're basically having 20% of their value stolen from them because it's disguised as inflation. But anyway, aside from that, this whole notion of agreeing to a set of rules by your participation is really interesting, because when you have rules without rulers, you don't have anyone that needs to control or command a group of people. Everyone mutually agrees on the set of rules, therefore can focus all of their energy on doing good work instead of having to worry about hierarchy. And so, one of the rules that we have at TFC, one of these central ones, especially within the Footnote program, is the discussion covenant. And basically, these are sort of rules of engagement, let's call it, for good conversations. So it's a set of rules that essentially we all agree to before we go into a discussion, and it facilitates generative discussions. And also productive disagreement, right? Like the Footnote program is not this space where everyone agrees on everything. We actually disagree a lot. And that's the whole point, because if you get in a place where everyone agrees, you don't end up learning, right? But the disagreements within this Footnote community actually foster an expanded understanding and more perspectives that we can kind of choose from and determine collectively what is the most appropriate perspective when it comes to big topics related to health. Not the specific stuff, but the really big frameworks or the general principles. That's a really important one. And the sort of end goal with the Foot Collective is actually to turn into a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. And that sounds like a mouthful, but basically it's an organization with rules that are hard-coded. Sorry about the doorbell. I see an Amazon person coming to the door. Rules that are hard-coded that essentially automate a lot of the decisions that a company needs to make. There we go. It automates a lot of decisions that need to be made based on collective input from its members and a set of rules that are hard-coded and agreed upon by all the members. So it's pretty cool stuff, right? The whole idea of getting a bunch of people to work together collaboratively is great in theory, but it's actually really hard to do in practical application. And I think this notion of rules without rulers and the discussion covenant in particular with the Footnote program and with the whole TFC community, because I think the discussion covenant should be something that we put in our Mighty network, because we're going to be having good discussions there and disagreements there, and it's important for us to understand the rules of engagement so that we can do that optimally. The next thing I want to talk about will be a shorter one today, but the second one is kind of related to this, but I want to talk about sense-making protocols. And this is sort of at the core of how we evolve. Like basically in the Footner program, we have a collective database of knowledge, of wisdom that we all have access to, and we're all co-contributing to evolve and improve over time, right? It's not like a group of people are teaching everyone else, it's everyone's teaching each other. And the way we make sense of all these different perspectives and information coming in is through sense-making protocols. And essentially that's what guides us in evolving and updating the Sapien code as time passes, right? That knowledge database, we call it the Sapien code. And any foot nerd that pays one-time enrollment fee to do the year-long program gets access to the Sapien code forever. And so I think that's kind of cool, because if you go to do a university program and then you want to do it 10 years later to update your knowledge, one, the knowledge may not have even been updated, which is kind of crazy because the world changes every year in a drastic way. But two, they're probably not going to give you just all the course material from the new version of the course, right? And that's this old analog way of doing higher education. And the Footner program is essentially the digitization and dematerialization of higher health education, right? Not only do we not really teach health in higher education, I went to physio school. I thought I was going to learn health. I learned how to diagnose and manage symptoms, which is not health. It's kind of the opposite of health. I think this whole notion of, creating a digitized program that is both more accessible, cheaper, and actually effective because it evolves over time. The more people that go through the program is that's some pretty cool stuff. So sense-making protocols, that's how we evolve the Sapien code. And essentially it's a standardized process of communication. So when someone reads a chapter in the Sapien code, they then have the opportunity, once they're complete the program, to send in their input on that chapter, to challenge the content of that chapter. It's kind of like Wikipedia. It really is kind of like it was inspired by a wiki where a bunch of people are contributing, and then there's sort of a protocol for making sense of all the incoming input. And so it's sort of like this system with built-in intelligence for how we make sense of the world. That's really what sense making means, right? It's like we're all trying to learn how to make sense of this crazy world. We're taking the slice of that, which is health, and we're all working on our own kind of personal mastery of health, and then sharing our collective insights so that when one person learns, we all learn. And now there's like 160 some people in the tribe, and it's a pretty cool space. And there's also insanely smart people. There's doctors, physios, chiros, parents that don't work in health that are it's really cool to have all these different perspectives come in. And also this entire support network where we're all just helping each other figure health out. We're helping each other feel better every day and understand why it's so hard to make changes sometimes, and why our understanding of health can sometimes be so limiting to actually making progress, right? Because knowing what you should be doing is really a small part of the problem. The hard part of the problem is actually making those changes, because change is hard, right? Change is uncomfortable, change is scary, but you can make changes. I promise you, I had mangled feet like 5 years ago from wearing soccer cleats for rugby, and now I got some really strong paws that are really resilient. So like anyone can make these changes. You just have to kind of understand a framework for how to learn how to make those changes and not just go for the quick fix. So yeah. Sense-making protocols, that is our superpower at the Footner program. That is the mechanism behind our what we call distributed learning, where it's not one of us learning and teaching the rest. It's all of us learning together, collaboratively, which is actually it's an exponentially more powerful way to learn when you learn with others than learning independently, right? Like you have to learn independently and then bring it to others to collaborate. So there's kind of both that are required, but it's very powerful. If anyone wants more information about the Footner program, which is really just this year-long commitment to health, right? To commitment of mastering the 5 pillars of health, to making changes in your life, and having some accountability and support provided by the community. So it's not just for health professionals. We have probably just as many non-health professionals as we do health professionals. However, with the health professionals, it's an extremely empowering program to allow you to kind of rediscover a sense of joy and vigor in your work, where you no longer are responsible for someone's health. You're just responsible for guiding them on the path to health. And that's really cool. So hopefully that gave you some insight, rules without rulers, and sense-making protocols, two really important elements of the foot nerd program and of TFC as a whole. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope the input was insightful. Feel free to comment on the Mighty Network or on the YouTube video if you have any input. And I wish you all a magical, wonderful day. And thanks again for watching. Ciao.